Hey everyone, welcome to Designing Up. I'm pretty excited to I've been joined by Helen. Helen is a senior manager UX at Decathlon. For those who are listening, Helen, can you give a little introduction about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Nguyen, and hi, everybody that's listening. Yeah, I'm Helen Arvanitopoulos. I'm currently leading a vertical called Customer Growth at Decathlon Digital. I'm originally from Australia, Sydney. Shout out to the Sydney Siders, where my background in digital design, user experience, and product has brought me over to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I've led, let's say, legacy or corporate organizations from companies like Aegon to then working with yourselves at Spryker, and also worked at startups in Europe as well, where I've headed up product design and user experience for these sort of organizations.
For those who listening, yeah, Helen used to be my ex-manager. So yeah, we're gonna talk a lot about design. So we'll definitely talk things like design leadership, where design is heading, the state of design, and hiring. That's another subject I'd love to talk. Yeah, there's so many great topics I'd like to cover. But maybe we start with Helen. How do you get into design, first of all?
Yeah, interesting. I've been a career veteran of design for a while. I started in graphic design, let's say. So design was very different to what it is now and has rapidly evolved since the 2000s, pretty much when I started my career. So I worked in graphic design, which then turned into web design when everyone was creating web. But I had my first exposure to working for a pure user experience company, and UX was very different back when UX first started, which was more around information architecture, research. That's the origination of user experience because you're creating experiences for users. So I worked at a user experience organization, which I felt more in love with understanding on how we are creating experiences for the user and really taking on the learnings or observations and studying human behavior into what we were producing when it came to the digital landscape. And my career went down more of an IC track in Sydney. As I said, I was mostly building up my career there. I was at a point where I was a principal at I don't want to say, an interactive company, but then I had an opportunity to go to Europe and not saying something I always wanted to do, but I had an opportunity to move to Europe where I went down more of the management route into managing and leading user experience and taking everything that I learned and implementing that into a very different arena. And when I say arena, coming from where Sydney or Australia, yes, there's various nationalities, but I had a massive culture shift when I moved to Europe. So down that manager track in Europe was where then I started leading teams, implementing design. And here I am. So that's my evolution.
And actually, when you talk about the management and IC roles, we'll talk about AI in a bit, but I just want to also ask this question now. With AI, there's a lot of people shifting into senior ICs and super IC as they say. What's your thought of that? Do you think that also create maybe a more demand for great managers because of shifting now into ICs?
It's interesting. I have been looking into this topic quite a bit and just trying to understand or unpack this, I think, scenario that we're in when it comes to AI and whether being in a management role or IC role is where are you in a better position to be? What is happening is the role of design is changing. However, I think there's a place for both. It just depends where are you at and what is it that you're trying to push when it comes to being a designer within the AI age. I think what we're seeing, why a lot of people are, let's say, shifting to IC is they're freaking out that there's more of a role for IC. So I had a funny enough a conversation during the week with someone about how I think I'm seeing a lot of push, let's say whether it's LinkedIn or recruiters kind of feeding recruiter influencers, if that's what they're called these days, pushing a narrative that you have to have this
Yeah.
amazing design trajectory of how are you using AI or how are you an AI native designer and your portfolio is going to be great. Like I'm seeing a lot of this information being pushed and I'm not seeing this as a great thing because it's making a lot of people self-doubt. And then we often talk about imposter syndrome, how we're feeling as designers, because then also I'm sure you've had a career, I've had a career in trying to influence design and get a seat at the table. So we're in this, I don't want to say catch 22, but I think we are hurting each other in the industry by pushing the narrative that doesn't need to be there. doesn't matter if you're an IFC or a manager. I think there is a place. And what does that look like? I think we have to start looking at how businesses are implementing AI. Because again, we're all moving at the speed of light, faster than that. How is AI coming into play and we're doing it wrong? That's my 2 cents. But I think that we need to unpack a little bit more on how is AI playing a role in your organization? What's the role of AI? And how are designers, whether they're a native AI designer, or how do they incorporate AI into their world? And then we start looking at that for now.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of people talk about this, and actually a contrarian opinion on another thing. Maybe you can also tell me what you think. That everyone talk about now is design. The most impact that AI brings is the this visual aspect, right? So you need to hit like really cool stuff, good looking stuff. But I really still believe like it's more where we're going. I think design is going to impact more on the system and infrastructure more than actually the visual. I think we're just surface level right now, figuring out. So, it's easy to do visuals, but I think it's going to come to a point soon. Like, we're going to figure out again the people who can actually systematically do things, right?
That's right. I think so. Yes, there is a craft side of things. 1000%. Like it just means there is still a need for when we say design it as a craft, because there's things that
Yes.
AI can't do when it comes down to really visually, like there's the visual appeal, really implementing the user experience gaps, holes that we need to make sure that is seamless and it's creating that experience for our users. Yes, there's an element there, but we're thinking that again, when we think of AI in design, everyone's assuming, awesome, let's plug it into a Lovable, a Claude, a whatnot, create a prototype, then I've got something, I build upon that, the end. No, goes back to what I originally just said is everyone's working at a different type of organization. You might be a 1,000 employee organization or a quite corporate legacy, which we were discussing earlier. It's a lot harder to implement things. How do you understand, as you just said, systems? And I think this is where, how are you as an AI, or let's say designer, incorporating AI, starting to thinking systems, thinking in journeys where how we understanding, how are we building based on how the structure, like, I don't want to say that we should be showcasing how a structure of an organization is set up when we're building our products, but there's got to be thinking behind this on how do we incorporate AI into the way that we're building our products based on what type of organization or product that we're selling. I think it's a bit easier to incorporate AI into smaller startup scale-ups that move a lot quicker. In legacy organizations, yes, there's tools and approaches. You can definitely get things done faster, but I think there's a difference between automation is obviously how we making our tasks quicker. And then there's implementing AI, which is being able to hop, skip and jump processes to get to creating something that we haven't built yet.
That is true. And I think that's where the most people will continue struggling, in my opinion also, right? Because like, it doesn't matter, like all these tools are really helpful, but certainly when you mention things legacy, they're the biggest challenge you're going to come. I'm also very excited to see like how those companies adapt and change, and maybe there is a really good use cases everyone can use. Actually, you talked about craft. Everyone's talking about it right now.
I feel like I hadn't heard the word for so long. And all of a sudden, craft is everywhere. What's going on?
Yeah, I actually like your take on it. Like, what do you mean by craft? Is it great design? Is it the intuition? Is it the eye for design? Is it the case to understand the product sense and then figure out what it needs to behave and look like for customers?
Yeah, I think I did a bit of reflection on this terminology. And what I think is happening, why I think craft is coming into play. If you think of, let's remove AI for a second, where what people don't realize when you come into a lot of organizations, you're thinking, oh, I can change the world. I can be this great designer, which you are. But how, like, are you then understanding what you walk through the front door and then you realize that the organization is complex. The way things get done are not done very quickly. They might take weeks, months. So why I'm saying this is it goes back to, there's a lot of processes in organizations. There's a lot of, collaborating across functions, engineering, product, data, design. What ends up happening is, I don't want to say people lose the craft side of things. You're implementing user experience, implementing visuals, but you might have a design system that this is how we have to implement our designs. Again, going back to this craft, is craft a visual appealing screen? Because how does a craft play a role in how an organization is set up to create that experience? I think craft for me at the moment is how are you incorporating all these tools now that we're going to be using that you are able to still implement, when I say intuitive designs that are going to answer the user experience, because user experience goes back to how are we understanding how our customer or user is engaging with our product and creating a product based on that. So yes, visually appealing, but is a person still able to go from A to B to C? Craft sounds more like it is visual. It just depends what sort of organization you're going into. Goes back to, I really believe that, hence why I said earlier, AI has a role to play. You have to understand, how does it play a role in the organization or a company that you're going to be working with, and how can you use this, incorporating what you need to get done? So craft for me, I believe, is all about incorporating it from a user experience perspective, where you're able to influence what the outcome is going to be by creating, yes, visually appealing craft, but using the knowledge of how a user is going to engage with your product.
I think I have a very similar also takeaway about craft. And that's, like you said, I think there's so much buzzword. I always try to figure out what people mean, because I see on LinkedIn everywhere. And then I always go back to like old design, right? Old times. I mean, everybody understand the craftsmanship, right? You see a great product, you know it's physical, digital, it doesn't need to matter. And living in Italy, I can tell you, like, the design and craft is so important in the culture there, right? Like, you can see the cars, you can see the architecture, and everyone talks about it. It's the same thing, I think, in design in general. Like, when you see a really great design, it doesn't matter visually or the process you use, whatever, right? And you can see like somebody exceptionally putting craftsmanship there. So I feel the same in today too.
I think as well, like, don't get me wrong, I love craft, and I love that you referenced as well being in Italy, where, my background and love is in architecture. And I mean, the way I started in graphic design, so there's got to be a visually appealing approach to what we do. I think sometimes, though, what I've been looking at lately when it comes to, let's say, visual design, there's a lot of beautiful imagery, typography. I feel like it's great that we're going back to, I really say, back when I first started out in design. However, we're living in a digital world where I'd love to see all that visually appealing stuff on, let's say, someone's brand. Like, they're a company and they've got a brand, or let's say, there might be an influencer, you might be going to their personal brand. That's more where I'd want to see visually appealing stuff. Going to let's say you're going to use your bake. Yeah. If you're a Revolut customer or a Monzo customer, I'm not saying it can't be visually, quote unquote, visually appealing and have a beautiful craft or a visual identity to it. However, I'm not there to be impressed by my Revolut bank's visual. I'm not looking for flashcards coming. I want to get from A to B. So this is why how do you incorporate craft that still takes into consideration that user experience? Because at the end of the day, what is a company or a product trying to achieve? There's a place, and craft can be subjective, as you just said. Your opinion might be different to my opinion, but there's still a place. And I think everything should be beautiful and appealing, but there has to be a use for it. I hate sometimes when I go to someone's portfolio website, and it's visually appealing, it's amazing, but I can't get through it to where I need to get to. See what I mean? This is where craft can be great, but it can also lead to frustration, which will make me jump off your website.
That's a great point. The bank example is a great point. I think there the craftsmanship comes, I guess, the speed and, how to go A to B very quickly and just go away from the app, right? Do your task rather than like visually appealing, and you spend time, maybe 5 minutes doing a task, then you defeat the purpose.
1000%. And I think what I think we should be maybe referencing is agency a little bit more than craft. That for me is where I think we should be pushing more of let's say, a narrative. I'm not saying agency is what I see where AI is going to make you I don't want to say a standout designer, but have this more influential role. Like, agencies where the money will be for me is, because agencies are around autonomy and influence. And I think this is what's going to be important moving forward, especially if you're a designer in these companies that want these type of designers. Because again, we go back to what you said about LinkedIn, it's a dangerous world out there on the LinkedIn world. Don't get caught up in it, all the listeners. But I really believe that they're trying to scare you, because some of these companies, they're very big, awesome companies, but the reality of the scenario, and I don't know because I'm not working for them, is it really what they're saying that it is, that you're using craft? Or maybe if I call out a company right now, like, I'm seeing a lot that they promote, Intercom being a very high influential AI organization, which I went to their website recently, and you can tell that they're moving in the direction of AI. It's a very AI first organization. I don't know, again, I don't work there, but I'd like to know, how does craft play a role there versus high agency for me?
That's a great segue to the next topic also. But I think before that, I want to just put also pin on the craft. I think maybe this is, maybe you agree or disagree, but I think also this conversation, we talk about craft and a lot these days. Maybe we're just too tired of seeing boring designs, like pretty mediocre design too much, right? It's every app looks same, everything behaves the same. Maybe it's just like they need some kind of
I
differentiator,
think
right?
so. And I think this is where, I don't know if you've seen a few, I think I've scrolled a couple of times on Instagram where I've seen that our design has changed from the, let's say, 50s and 60s, where there was color, there was personality. Now we're very seamless. The wooden colors, like very kind of like Scandinavian dyes, slim line, straight lines, minimalism. And I think the minimalism, so going back to craft, bringing the beauty to things or difference versus, as you said, everything is the same. Every application, will often say, use it like this app, or I want it to do this app, because everyone's just become monotonous in their approach on how everyone's using the same sort of somewhat products. So we're just becoming, is it weird to say, robots in even the way that we're using things, that we don't have any personality. So this is where I think the craft side of thing is bringing a bit of personality to the designs that we're making.
100%. And actually, what you said earlier about the agency, I think this is also a really important thing. Maybe we should talk about that. Because I think with AI, if anything, like for me personally, is the agency went so much because there's so much things I can do now. And this is like personal and professional way, right?
Yeah.
Even the podcast, I use completely all the AI tools and for everything.
Amazing.
It's just so crazy how much you can do compared to before. And do you think this, just also a question to designers these days, should be looking more being very entrepreneurial? Like, because you can do a lot of things, so then your role defines you now, right? I think if you're a really good designer, you can just, go to the different spectrum now, like PM or engineer or whatever the case, if you're good at it.
Completely. And great question. I think what is happening today as well, the landscape, or just engaging with products. And as you said, could you go down an entrepreneurial route in the sense of the tools that we're using today? I think from AI's making people reflect on, when I say it's not making, okay, you're using AI, I'm not saying you're sitting here reflecting on your life, but you have so many opportunities now to explore various avenues. We are in a time where organizations are making a lot of changes. They're getting rid of a lot of people, reorgs, restructures. So people are starting to educate themselves and use these tools to be able to create products, to maybe pivot in their career and become, as you said, whether it's maybe a designer to a PM or a PM to a designer or an engineer, because now you have opportunity to vibe code. So you're learning to code a little bit. So the roles shifting and changing, and there's a revolution occurring an evolution, not a revolution, sorry. And this now gives us an opportunity to change our approach. So why I then mentioned about agency, which is as well, when you're saying about whether being an entrepreneur is around looking at a problem or understanding what problem you're trying to solve. So you're looking at something that you're wanting to make better. So how are you making impact in the world? So this is high agency for me, and it gives you that opportunity to, go down the route of exploring what could I be doing other than my day-to-day job, because maybe I might not have a job in a few months because the world is changing. So I think looking at your role and how agency plays a part, and that would be more important to me, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I like what you said about creating your brand. This is a great way for that actually to go and create something where you never thought before you could, because you can actually do so many things with AI now. Even creating crazy websites. I've seen like some of my friends doing like this animations and stuff, like,
I'm getting jealous. I'm like, Jesus, I've got to step it up.
That's good for, in general, I think, for designers. I know a lot of people are saying, hey, you probably know this more than me, but everyone's talking about like it's pretty bad for design state. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's pretty hard for getting a job and stuff these days. Roles are very limited. But same time, I feel like we were so much saturated with design. But now it's just, if you're a really great designer, I think you're pretty good. Your odds are.
I think, and I like what you just said, and what I want to say to this is I think as well, yes, design was saturated, but I think it's as well the role of design was placed at one point where if you look at, and I don't want to keep using the word agency, but if you look at someone that's low agency or what the difference is we started them becoming just executioners in a sense, executioners from just delivering work. We were doing craft of design, quote unquote, like really creating experiences, building something that we love that answers problems. And I know we sound fluffy, then again, the typical designer, but then design just was, these are the things that we need to get done. This is what you just need to get that done and get it out the door. So the role had shifted on what we were passionate about, but all we wanted to do was work for these amazing companies. We get into these amazing companies and we're not doing the work that we love. Now that we have some tools that are now automating a lot of those, I don't want to say mindless tasks, but now the role of design is shifting to then maybe bringing this a little bit more back, as in the craft and the beauty side of things, where we have the opportunity to now change the way design is perceived in the industry.
Follow up on what you said. With this, like there's a lot of the role of a designer is changing. But I feel like this is really important also for design leaders now more than ever to maybe track differently, right? How design is like maybe super close to business more than ever. Because there's so many ways that design becoming let's say, differentiator these days. But like, what do you think of like as a design leader? Like, how do you actually now track your team? Different ways of maybe KPIs now you use compared to before, or like what shift are you seeing?
I think if I was to look at let's just say the past 3 roles or just even the time that I've been in Europe, the role of design influence and how we work with business has shifted to, if you're not able to understand business side of the game, you will fall behind. So you'll really need to start like being in a manager position versus an IC, not saying that you have to have that level of influence. You have to be able to influence and have conversations with your counterpart across all functions and all levels. Where I'm sitting, I have to make sure I'm reaching up to various VPs, even across different verticals, because I sit in a certain vertical. How are you influencing and understanding what the business is trying to do? So when it comes to how we tracking KPIs or certain metrics, we need to understand what is the outcome we are trying to achieve as it's always going to do. What is the company goals? But you start looking at the scope of work you're trying to do. How do we start measuring impact? And we start looking at various product metrics. From those product metrics, we'll start refining and defining our design metrics that we can see that we're going to be influencing those metrics. So we can showcase how the role of design is impacting those product outcomes as well. So we tend to feed off a lot more of the product metrics, but we tend to, the way that I tend to work is understanding certain flows across those metrics that we're trying to create and seeing the impact at what point we are implementing change and how a user experience or design is influencing those flows. And those are the metrics that I'm tracking across a journey versus creating specific design metrics. It's evaluating from a flow the product metrics we're trying to achieve, and then understanding at what point we might need to look into further here and influence there. So that's the way that I look at the metrics when it comes to impact.
I believe there is no real process for AI, right? Like, at least like, I don't know, maybe in your company, if you have, but I talked to a previous guest from Deal and he mentioned that they don't, and they want people to try everything. And it's just like, understand.
I don't have any AI metrics that we're seeing to implement at the moment. This isn't coming up. However, our product metrics are the main ones. And I guess this will evolve over time, right? I think if you're thinking about just what I said is, if you're looking, I don't want to say customer flows, but if your flow or I don't even want to use the word process, but if you're looking at how things get done, AI at certain points will come into the workflow. How is it, let's say you're going to have reduced time? Yes, because AI is trying to help you get to something quicker. That's one element of AI. Then it's also, well, is it creating the experience that I want? Is that reducing those barriers? I don't know. So I'm sure this might come up at a later stage, but it's not there for us at the moment.
I like to see a little bit more also where Figma is heading. They're doing a lot of great changes, but yeah, maybe we come to a point and they come up with a very different product that we should put on in the process.
I'm sure. And I'm sure they're probably already thinking about it. We know Figma very well.
Yeah, I also listened to recent podcast from Dylan, CEO, and what he was saying is very true. Though he was saying they don't want to just release any AI thing because there's so many. They just want to sure this adds so much value for the people.
Exactly. And I like that you just said the word value, right?
Yeah.
And you just said something, you don't want to just add AI for the sake of it. I think what now 2025 was the year of AI is the big buzzword. It's coming hard and strong. And now people are going, hold on, we're inflated. What is, again, goes back to my original point at the beginning of the conversation is, how is AI helping you, or what's its role in your organization, your world? What does it need to do for you? And I think this is now where people are saying, what value is it bringing for us or me? Again, however you are represented today. And that's where the standout in AI is going to be, in what value it's bringing. Because, well, look, obviously ChatGPT was a game changer. The value it brought was, well, I'm able to get answers quickly and I don't need to think of the long. But now it's turned into a very slippery slope. Is it doing good? There are elements of good, but there's also, the other side of the coin.
Actually follow this up, talk about the value of design again. I don't know, right now I feel like a lot of companies are putting design as the key differentiator compared to past. It was all about technology, just putting technology out there, whatever the best technology, and usually investments and the companies grow. But like we're coming to the area where everything stops now and companies are struggling, and more than ever I feel like especially leaders are running into the design to becoming like the competitive advantage, right? And you can see this from Shopify. Also, the guest I interviewed like 3 episodes back, he used to be also director at Shopify, told me the standard, especially for design, and CEO buy-in for design is crazy, and how he sees the vision. And I feel like more than ever now, companies are struggling because they actually back to the customer value, right? They say they care about customer-centric value, but I don't know if people are really actually mean it, because you can still not everybody understand their customers as they should. I think this is like the biggest part now. And that's why design is addressing that, right? And design has always been about the customer and getting close and building the value for them. What's your take on that? Because I feel like this is like coming actually exactly where we talked way back,
All I want to say to that is 1000% agree, because our core to our mission as a designer is design for users. Simple as that. Whether you're a user experience designer, we were always known as empaths, right? There's an emotional side to us. And that's why we're so passionate about craft too, because we are emotional people. We're missing this element of design. What is it bringing for that person? And hence why as well AI has caused so much noise, and even like from a social media perspective, not to go down that route, but we've lost that human connection. And this is what now companies are looking at. How do we connect emotionally with our users? And this is where design is going to be playing a role in bringing that human element while making sure a product embraces the technology that we should be implementing, by keeping an emotional approach to the things that we're building. Because this is what, quote unquote, is missing, has been missing, was never always prioritized. And I think that shift is going to happen because we're going to be so nostalgic for it.
Yeah, this is more than true for companies like you mentioned, like bank sectors, like B2B, which is another one. And I'm pretty excited talking actually VP of design from a B2B company. I'll do like in a few episodes. So we're going to talk a lot about B2B in that episode. So right now, I feel like this is why a lot of companies are struggling, and the companies who care about this design and the part of the customer obsession, right? Like really to understand and change, knows the product market fit really well, are actually winning. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy because I don't know why it took this long for a lot of companies to understand. I'm talking about this, a lot of companies struggling right these days.
I've used this reference. Look at, Lovable is now the biggest tech company. What is their name of their company? It's called Lovable.
Yeah.
Why did he create that name? Because he was wanting an emotion. And what are they doing? I'm sure, I think we both follow Lovable, and a lot of the people from Ellen Arvanitopoulos to Anton, they never talk from a business. I'm not saying that there's not elements from a business perspective, but they've always wanted people to be at the center of this product that they're building. And how many people are using this product? Everyone, because they're putting a user first. And when we say user first, it just means they're understanding those emotions. They're understanding the using AI to a benefit was to create something that everyday people could use and build a product. Now there's people who were a mother at home taking care of her kids is able to build a product in her spare time. Do you know what I mean? This is that, I'm not saying that is the only reason why they're successful, but companies or organizations that look at the human factor are probably going to be ahead of the game than others.
All right, Helen, I think this has been a really great topics that we call about design, but maybe one area that we need to cover about hiring. I think this is something we're going to cover before we wrap up our podcast. Maybe first of all, like, what do you think about the state of design hiring, finding a great designer, let's say as a manager for yourself, as a hiring manager, or a candidate looking for great companies? What's the state? What do you think?
How honest do you want me to go?
100% honesty.
Yeah. Oh, it's not saying it's a tough question. It's just, I have so many thoughts on it and I'm trying to make sure, how do I bring the best response in? I think businesses are not looking at who they are. I've often said this through this podcast today, that I don't want to use the term of around sheep, but we as a society we just follow. People are not setting up their own approach to what it is that they want, what they're looking for, who they're trying to be, and what does that look like. In the past, I've worked for a small startup and then organizations that have a structure to hiring. And then even obviously I have applied for jobs and have been down the hiring route, which is difficult. And I say this because right now I feel like the way that we're hiring just does not meet the requirements for these organizations, what someone is looking for. The job descriptions are written terribly. There's no truth to what they're looking for. And then hence why when you get into, again, I've mentioned on this, you go through the door and it's nothing like what you were discussing in the interview. We are set with design tasks, portfolio reviews, case studies, whatever they are, where you're feeling judged and critiqued. That doesn't as well speak to the company that you're applying for. I think we've turned there's a written structure out there in the world of design that you have to have 6 interviews. One of them's a case study or a portfolio review. Everyone's got it's terrible. There's too many steps. It doesn't meet the expectation of the person looking for the job. Sorry. I'm always sitting on the side of the person looking for the job, because at the end of the day, you want them to hang around. You want them to stay at the company. These processes are set up for the employer. It still doesn't answer the question of what it is that they're going to be doing inside the organization. I've redefined some of the approaching, like working at Decathlon and a few other organizations, understood it on what I'm looking for within the steps. So meaning I brought a bit of how I would like the structure to play out, because at the end of the day, you have to, I don't want to set up one of my team members for failure in this organization if I was to hire them. I just don't see it as realistic. So I know I said a lot of things and probably is not going to the point, but let me say it from a person that would be looking for a job. I don't like the structure of the setup. I don't think it works for the person being hired. I think now I would way prefer that someone would pay me for my time, half a day, get into the office or remotely, you're doing the work with them. Simple as that. You have your recruiter screening, which is normally the first step. Then you meet with the hiring manager. Right, let's do a in-person half day. That's where you should be able to get. These interviews they mean shit. And so that's the side of me looking for someone. I'm applying for the role. On the other side of the hiring manager, the hiring manager has to write that job description. But what do? We're lazy. We just use an automated template that existed. And maybe I'm saying too much on this podcast, but I think people are going to agree with me. And no one's really understanding what I'm looking for. I sit in a specific vertical and I've hired for my vertical. What someone at my level in another vertical, they would be hiring the same sort of, let's say, senior designer. But again, their scope is different. The approach is different. They should be different job specs. But I bet you if we were both to look for a senior designer in both our verticals, we would use the exact same template, correct? And we'd have the same process and we'd be going off the script that these are the questions you ask versus trying to set the stage for the reality of this is what it looks like here. And I've been a hiring manager where I've had to be beyond realistic. This is what goes on in these companies. And I've been very honest with some of my team. And if they end up listening to this, they'll know. And then they've often said, you were not lying to us when you told us this is what the reality of the scenario is going to be, because we've made out as if getting a job at a specific company or, is going to, this is the great peak, versus if they go in there as well, they can see the reality of the scenario and make that decision. When I say maybe I didn't answer the question, but I think we need to review the hiring process. I think companies need to change their approach, look at what they need for themselves. Yeah. And that's it. I've hired off 2 interviews, one interview meeting them that said, all right, let's do some work together. Bang, done. They're on. Especially now we were saying high agency, high craft. If you want to speak that, okay, get them on the tools.
I'm actually going to talk with a recruiter too, by the way. That will be very interesting. I have so many questions. It's going to be very good. Like I've been following recruiters lately, also on LinkedIn, figuring out like how especially senior people are getting hired. I have to say, like, there's a lot of debates and opinions, but I also feel like you need to reinvent the hiring process now, especially we are in a different age and we've been following these big 7 companies, I would say like the top 7, their hiring playbook for too long. And those companies play a way different role than 99% of the companies. And there's no realistic for a very small company to do 8 rounds of interview. And just because it's like the bureaucracy, like, I don't know, the processes of politics that's internal, everybody needs to talk with somebody, just before they subjectively approve them. It becomes like so bad, I also feel, because what you said earlier actually, and your answer is correct, like lovable. I don't want to go details because I don't know exactly, but I heard one of these another podcasts that lovable and also linear. They give you like 6 months or 2 months, whatever contract, and you go to there and work for them, and that's the job.
100%. 100%. I am not lying to you. I am with you on that. That's why what are you looking for? You could have, I'm not saying you can't see much off the resume. You will see it. You might look at their LinkedIn profile. They might have a portfolio website. Have a conversation to understand. Again, there's a dynamic, right? You're going to connect with, when I say dynamic, it just means, are there certain elements that you hear from the conversation you're having with them that spark what you're looking for? And then also, again, I really believe when it comes to the hiring process, it is always in favor of the employer. Never favors the employee. We need to shift that. And I'm a hiring manager and I think it's broken. It does not serve the employee who is what you are wanting to bring out the best work, no matter what level they are at. I think then don't even get me started on the leadership part. Like from strategies that they want, the reality does not exist. They say they want these, strategic stuff, or you're not being strategic or things like this. And then you go into the organization and there's a bunch of politics going on where you can't get your point across and understand. Even again, we could sit here and say all the AI is coming in and doing this. Reality scenario too, you can go into an organization, still got legacy setup, legacy processes, legacy approach. How does AI play a role? We've got to start being realistic. I can't stress this enough. Like, sorry if I can say this, we've got to cut the bullshit and start being honest. No one's going to say, oh my God, I don't want to work for that company. They'd be more than likely going, you know what, this is the reality of the scenario. And I love it. I love that they were open.
The hiring is always hard. I feel like especially here, this is way more true, like, because there aren't really great leaders as used to be. I think, especially because we don't actually have this leadership. I don't know how to phrase this, but I feel like in the past we had like a leadership ladders, like a lot of people start becoming very experienced leaders, and now there's so many people shifting into leadership very fast. So maybe they have a different opinion. I'm not saying like it's the wrong or right, but I feel like also hiring, it needs a lot of intuition. I feel like it's very hard to based on data or metric alone, right? Because you might be a great candidate, but you might not fit the company culture simply. Or you might hate the problems that they encounter or interact in this complicated cross collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So this is what I'm trying to say. Like sometimes you really need to this kind of like intuition of as great manager, I guess, leader, to figure out match the piece. It's almost like drafting like sports teams, right? They go to I
often reference a football team, and being a Manchester United supporter, it's hard. So I feel like I relate. But see, this is the thing, and I love that you said about leadership. That's why I mentioned around the politics of an organization, because there are great leaders, but then the role of a leadership, or at least a higher executive role, shifts. We used to look at, like, if you think of when we used to work together, we often used to speak of great people that we saw coming out of the Amazons or Google's. Like, I mean, they were our reference point at that point, right? I'm not saying that these aren't great companies, but I wouldn't even be referencing them these days because there's so many other amazing companies. And when we say leadership, it means how were they able to, it's not about just influence, but like implemented approaches, how they saw ideas and changed the scope and then, looked at solving a problem that, created such impact. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. And again, there's so many various companies, but I feel like leadership is now coming into a role and just dealing with the politics that goes on in a company and navigating the complexities of an organization versus really being able to make change unless you're in these sort of bigger organizations that allow you to be a bit more innovative. You got to remember too, you're coming into some companies that you're going to have budgets. People don't give the realistic expectation of what goes on, what you're going to be quote unquote managing or leading or having to deal with. This does not exist in these interviews, telling them the reality of the scenario. And that's why how many times have you been in an interview and then you get 5 minutes to ask your questions?
That is 100% true.
So where do you get the opportunity to see something that, are you going to be able to bring your best ability of being a designer leader? No, because you're not, you see the reality, but then you're excited that you got this job or you're working for this company. And then the reality of the scenario is it isn't it.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we're at.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah. I'm going to look forward to that conversation you're going to have with the recruiter, because I'd be key to see if they're quite honest. And I'd love for us to start being really honest about how we feel about this setup.
Well, there should be a new revamp of hiring process. I'm pretty sure it'll come pretty soon, because the opposite side, the flip side, I guess, is very hard to hire great everybody, talents in general, but especially in designer too. Since we talk about design, it's very hard to hire great designers too, because you can put all these processes, but a lot of people, great talents, don't just go there, right? Just because they can, like you mentioned, they can see the crap before even starting.
Completely. And I don't know if I downloaded this because it's a platform. It's whether you're a freelancer or just wanting to find some design work as, a contractor. It's called Contra, but I just didn't even heard of it. Have you heard of this website? Otherwise,
No, I haven't. Yeah.
And
check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Why I'm mentioning it? The designers on this, it's similar. It's now like the new Dribble in so many words, but it's more quite interactive. Like it's got like how Substack has a feed. It's got a feed of people putting up their designs. So just to go back to what you're sort of saying about it's hard to find great talent. This talent isn't looking for jobs either. They're freelancers, they're contractors, they're doing their own thing because they don't want to deal with the reality of, and I'm going to say this word, corporate, because the reality of the scenario is it becomes, these organizations end up in the corporate world. And I know we're talking about the hiring process, but then it goes back to people are not wanting to work for corporate. They want to be creative. They want to do their craft. So again, it goes back to all the topics that we spoke about today. How are these organizations really telling the reality of the scenario for someone, for them to do their best work? And then they have like you're hiring this great designer, you see their talent, but then they get in here and they're not even doing that. But you're like, I got a great designer. But no, now none of them are wanting to come to corporate. They're wanting to do their own thing. So they'll pick and choose who they want to work for. Right now, yes, it's an employer market.
Yeah.
But the shift will come soon, as you're saying, shifting in, and it'll be an employee market where it'll change. And I'm glad. I can't wait.
I can see at least like very great talents, like starting their own thing, like back to entrepreneurship. I think right now is the way to go. There's a lot of opportunities. I think if you really have the high agency and have the right mindset and a great craft, like everything we talked about, you can actually do a lot of things and change the narrative, I guess, from old school. But I want to also ask Helen, for a lot of listeners also listening, maybe junior, mid, senior, like, maybe not the leadership level, but all of but below, I feel like it's pretty hard, at least for me. Like I do a lot, as you know, I do mentorship, and I get a lot of people asking all the time about figuring out how to get a job, how to find a company, what's the portfolio need to be. What do you think the state, like, how, maybe a question like, how they should approach the current job market, especially when you're like below, let's say, leadership level?
Yeah.
It's really tough now.
I think what it needs to be is as well, it's even going back to how we tailor our resume for the company. I think you need to be your authentic self. I know this gets thrown even around a lot, be your authentic self, but it goes back to being true to who you are as a designer. What are your superpowers, your strong suits, and to make sure as well that that gets showcased as well, and you're not just going for the applicant, like applying because you need the job, and then you're changing who you are to fit a box, right? So I think if why I'm saying this is in the past, and when I say we're not hiring, because again, it's we have budgets and whatnot, but when I look for someone or want to work with someone, yes, there's things that you need them to do that's going to help what you're looking for. But I want them to be their authentic self. That who are they? How have they gotten to where they've gotten to? What do I then am able to see them showcase that I can say, yep, that's their superpower. When I say superpower, it just means their high agency on this certain element, and I can see that being showcased in this organization that I'm hiring for. And I think we're not true to ourselves. We create a portfolio that's just showcasing our work, but I don't get to see who you are. Does that translate a bit with what I'm saying? Like we're just building to fit a box versus really creating a brand. And I think, who are you and who do you represent? And like, how do you show up every day as a designer, no matter what level you are? And how do I get to see that and why you've become good at what you're doing? And I'm saying this for myself as well, because I'm at that, when I say that situation where I've been reflecting a lot as of late, who am I showing up as a designer every day, or have I not been showing up as that designer that I've been to get to this point? Maybe I need to start shifting that. And I think this is what's missing. We're just creating all this stuff to showcase that I'm able to do all the things.
Yeah.
Versus who are you really as an individual that I would want to work with this person.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true, especially fitting in a team, right? Like as somebody to work with every day. But one thing I also say to my like mentees when I also do the feedback, resumes or mentorship, more than ever, I guess right now, like you got to show the business impact some kind of way.
Completely.
No, I mean, you don't need to, like a lot of people tell me like, yeah, but I didn't ship this, I didn't work. But I think it's not the point, right? It's about like, you need to think and you need to have the mindset of like, what are the things that you're going to connect, right? In a design to a business. At the end of the day, you need to show this some way, creative way.
And I was just going to say this because I saw whether it was a tweet or something that said, if we were really honest in our questions, which is related to what was the impact, where people were then saying it took me 2 months to ship. But again, I know that because you said something, we've got to not say be creative with the outcome, but what outcome did you actually get to? That yes, we all want a metric or a result if it got there, but was there a change in the team? Was there a different thinking that went on, the influence that you made? What was the impact from design or you as an individual that contributed to this? Was it now that we were able to influence the roadmap? Because this is a very big metric as well. Are we able to be now driving or leading the conversation to how we were looking at the problems we were solving, right? Like these are metrics as well. And so, yeah, definitely but then that's why when I say the thing about who were you as an individual, this is what makes you like create that impact as well. How are you representing yourself when you work there to be able to make that impact? Because again, at the end of the day, we all have the exact same processes, same approaches. No matter what, when I say industry you're in, banking, I would say fintech or another space, there's still design processes and frameworks and whatnot that still have the same formula, but it's how you influenced or were able to approach it that shows your individuality that produces those outcomes.
I think also like a lot of people put like percentage increase here and there. Even like a lot of like big companies, you're not going to get these metrics unless you work for a massive company who has like super, connected data driven like processes, right? Not everybody has it, let's be honest. But also in this case, I would rather like challenge, like I prefer run somebody who create a hypothesis and show me how they measure it, and they're going to put the formula down that actually can work and we can actually really consistently check, the base hypothesis, rather than somebody just say, 25% increase. Because I feel like that's more business impact, because that's how every business starts, right? You have idea, you want to test it out your product and how you're going to put the thing and then improve and understand the customer, right?
But again, facts, and 100% agree with you. But then it goes back to how the setup of, like, again, if you're going about your interviews, how the interview process is set up and what they're looking for. And even though you might get an email and say, we want to see your process, want to get into the file. So I call BS. I call BS because you might be like, and that's great. And that's fantastic. That's a bonus for your organization. But the reality is not many people are going to sit there and go, well, I'm not saying you didn't do a hypothesis, but did you get to the point of what you needed to get to? Again, everyone's different. So
Yeah.
I agree. And I love that. I think it just depends on what, you might be looking for all that in someone's portfolio piece or showcase. Some people are just like, I want you to get to the point, or I want to see A, B, C. I think you just have to find the story that you're wanting to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the storytelling for sure. That's very important. How he says so. Well, yeah, but the hiring is a hard thing. And I read also a very pretty cool audiobook about, I forgot the name, but in Silicon Valley, early days of hiring. And then you can see like how much psychology went into hiring these big companies back in the day. They were obsessed with the American football way of hiring people for big roles. And yeah, like these are like super senior roles. But then I was thinking like, wow, how crazy hiring is actually. And still for this day, like even a very junior role, people are just overcomplicating hiring like crazy.
Completely.
So
and that's why I've been saying, BS on it, because come on. Like when you're saying junior designer or even someone wanting an internship or an entry level, come on, guys, like we're making out now. When I say we're unicorns and, I feel that, yeah, I feel like I'll keep it at that.
We'll definitely see a big shift in hiring. I'm pretty sure. So, Helen, I think we came to a pretty cool conclusion. Now, I got a lot of topics. Do you have anything else to add before we move into like quick wrap up questions?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Then a few questions then about which I usually ask all my guests. What's your favorite AI tools currently, and can you give me a use case? Or you using it?
Well, I've actually been using V0. I'm working on a personal project. I'm a traveler, as you might know, and I'm a very good organizer for people's, when I say itinerary, not your trip, like your social itinerary. A few people have actually said this to me about myself, and I thought I'd try and see if I could turn it into a prototype product that I could see if it's got a bit of legs. So I've been using V0 and then also implementing Superbase with that. Like I know it's more of a database, but I found that these products that I'd never had exposure to, especially like a database one, something that I've explored quite regularly. And I've obviously got Lovable, but V0 has been one I've actually preferred using. So that's my favorite.
Apparently, there was a poll that I recently saw on LinkedIn that most of designers prefer V0. I would say most people in general prefer Lovable, but when it comes to segment of designers, they prefer V0. So that's interesting.
That's great.
I also use V0, by the way.
Love it. Nice.
And can you recommend maybe a book or any other related article or something for designers?
Articles that I've been reading the most, and because I've been reading other books, but I think, look, I'm going to be just same old, but I'm a big reader of Helen Arvanitopoulos' Substack, and I know we both love her, and I don't know her, but big shout out. And I went to a talk she did in Amsterdam recently. I'm reading her newsletter on Substack regularly, and it's just really great. She understands it, she gets it, and she's when I say veteran, not an older person, just a veteran of the industry, that she's now working at Lovable, and just her insights and context is so relatable. And she's always got that emotional side to an individual versus always a corporation. So yeah, love Helen Arvanitopoulos.
Yeah, she's amazing, and she's the meme queen. Yes, memes.
Best memes.
And what's the best career advice you received?
Yeah, I think that's why I mentioned about being your true authentic self, because I also have an energized personality. I think over the years of being in this industry as well, I don't ever want to be inauthentic. Sorry. And the best advice that I've been given is to be your authentic self, because who you show up every day is important, and it gets you to where you need to get to, because you are living every day for you. So how are you making, your day the day that you want to live? So show up as your true authentic self.
It's a great advice. What's the biggest red flag you see in design portfolios? I mean, this can be very, very average red flags. I don't want to be too specific, but maybe like when you interviewing mid-level, senior level, juniors, whatever. What's like instant red flag you get?
In the instant red flag is, we discussed around outcomes and approach. I think what ends up happening is everyone goes through the design process, and we're not like, look at the topics that we've spoken about today. The process exists. It just is. It's really telling the story of whether you're showing a project, an initiative, a scope of work. Like when I say, I don't want to say the detail, you don't need to get into all the details. What was the story that you are going to tell me, and where were the challenges? What was it when we say team setup? How did you really get from A to B? And you're able to articulate that with then what was the outcome? And as we discussed around outcomes. So I think when I just see the typical, like, and it might be an age-old saying that I see this, that they're just showing the process and not really the reality of the scenario. Because again, you can see the fluff. Cut the fluff, get to like show the reality of the scenario. Because I think what we end up doing is in portfolios, we make it prettier than what it really is, the reality of the scenario. So show me the authentic. That's why I keep saying about being authentic. This is the reality. Show me the true authenticity of the work.
Thank you so much for joining. It's been really great talking with you. I think we talked for 1 hour. Yeah, I'll leave your LinkedIn if that's okay on the podcast description, so viewers can connect with you. Do you have anything else? Final thing to say before to wrap up?
So besides, thank you so much for talking with me. I think I just want to say to the people who would be listening and knowing about your podcast. And I love the fact that as well, it's a design focused podcast. There's a lot more, let's say, product focused podcasts out there. We are in an interesting area of business, and it's evolving, that I see exciting things happening, and I say, be true to yourself, still love what you do. There's going to be amazing things, I believe, coming our way as designers. So, keep the grind. We got this. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. See you soon.